This section, we're going to finally learn that the rules that we have been using in the previous sections are actually called functions. And we're going to start using slightly different notation when we deal with these. Basically, what we need to know about a function is that it's a rule that describes how inputs are matched to outputs. And we've dealt with a lot of examples of functions already in this section. So here's one example, the function y equals 3x plus 1. The x is the input, so I know that to the input I'm going to multiply it by 3, then add 1. That is my function rule. Multiply by 3, then add 1. This is the equation that tells me about that rule. Y in this case is the output. In this section though, we don't use x and y. We're using function notation, which changes y into this, what's called f of x. When we use this notation, what we mean is that rule f, when the input is x, we get 3x plus 1. If I ask, well, what is f of 2? What I'm asking is, in rule f, and rule f is this rule right up here, multiply by 3, then add 1. In rule f, what is the output when the input is 2? So input 2 into rule f. 3 times 2 plus 1, so the output must be 7. If you ever confused about this function notation, what you need to remember is that f of x just means the y. Just means y. F of x means the Let's consider the function rule g. These symbols are telling us that the rule is called g. So we're talking about rule g. That's the name of the rule. And rule g tells us, take x as the input and do this to it. What is the rule saying? The rule is saying multiply by 5, then add 1. So I could pick some more inputs. Let's say I want to input 3. So using rule G, I'm going to put 3 in, and this should happen to it. 5 times 3 plus 1. I should get the output of 16. Now let's use the same rule g as before, but let's consider this function over a specific domain. And all the domain is a list of all of the inputs that you can put into the function. So this function, I cannot just pick any number I want to put in for x. I can only use these numbers. That's what the domain means. It restricts the numbers that you can use as inputs. I want to figure out the range of this function. Range is the outputs. If these are the only inputs that I can put in, I must have a specific list of what the outputs could be. So I'm just going to do that by plugging in all of my inputs. Rule G of -1 means take 5 times -1 and add 1. So this is -4. -4 is in my range. It's a possible output. Do the same for the next input. Input 0. That means 5 times 0 plus 1. I should get 1 as an output. So 1 is a possible value in my range. I have one more value to plug in from my domain, and that is +1. And I 6 out. Given a specific domain, I can find a specific range. All you're doing is plugging in the values for your domain, your possible inputs. To find the range of this function, s, over the given domain, I need to plug in all of the domain values to find their range values. Okay, remember that domain is just another word we use for input, and when we look for range values, we are just really looking for the outputs. Okay, so I'm going to start by plugging in -2. So S of -2 is 5 minus 4 times -2. That means it's 5 minus -8, or 5 plus 8, so that must be 13. 13 is in our range. S of 0 is 5 minus 4 times 0. That is 5. So 5 is in the range. S of 2 is 5 minus 4 times 2, which is 5 minus 8, which is -3. So all the values in our range are 13, 5, and -3. To be more mathematically precise, we should rewrite these values in order from smallest to largest. To find the value of a function at a given point is you just need to input whatever they're asking for and figure out the output. Here's our function rule f. The variable we're using is x, and this is what we need to do to that variable x. We're going to square it and add 3 times that same value. Another way to write this is using the f of x notation with the parentheses like this. So these two functions are actually equivalent, and this is the more accepted way of writing this. I don't know why your book likes to write it this way. Anyway, if I want to find f of 7, that means my input is 7. Since there's two x's up here, I need to input 7 in both spots. So this is 49 plus 21. So this is 70. F of 7 is 70. -7, I need to be careful when I plug in -7 into a square, because -7 squared is 49, not -49. Plus -21 is going to be 28. So f of -7, is 28. Given the function f of x equals 3x minus 12, we first want to be able to find f of 0. F of 0 means input 0 for x. What is the output? In this case, it is -12. This question is very different from this one, which is saying solve so that f of x is 0. It's basically asking you what value for x makes the value of 0. So at the end I want 0 here, and what's the input? To do that, I'm going to say, okay, f of x is 0. What is x? Add 12, divide by 3, x must be 4. So our solution here would be that x